Hi everybody, welcome back to day 2. So today, for the second day of our computer science portion, we're going to talk about variables. So variables are super important to programming in computer science. You can't get very far in programming without using variables, so we're going to talk about them pretty early here. So in programming, or while we're writing code, a variable is a name that we give to some value. So it's a name for a value. So for example, if we look at the math expression 5 plus 6, so the value of 5 plus 6 is 11, right? We know, like, if we add 5 plus 6, we get the value 11. So we could write it down as an equation too, right? If we wrote it down as an equation, we might write x equals 5 plus 6. So if x equals 5 plus 6, what's the value of x? It's 11, right? And so that's kind of the same thing as saying that x is just a name for the value of 11. So that's how it works in programming. So we've given the name x to the value of 11, and we call x a variable. So this will make a little bit more sense as we go along and code this up. But in make code and in most programming languages, we can name variables pretty much anything we'd like. There are some little rules, but for the most case, you can give a variable basically any name. So instead of saying x equals 5 plus 6, so x is a name for the value 11, we could say instead that Fred equals 5 plus 6. So now we have a variable called Fred, and Fred is just a name for the value of 5 plus 6, which is 11. So let's see how that works in MakeCode. So if you want to head back to makecode.microbit.org, there's another link for you in the website here. And let's create a project called variables. So let me switch my screen over. Let's create this new project here, and let's call it variables. Alright, so pretty much all the work that we're going to do with variables is going to happen in this variables tab. So if you come down here, you notice like the variables tab, it's red. So anytime you're looking at code that has like a red anything, you know it's coming from the variables tab. So let's create a variable, and we got to give our variable a name, right? And I'm going to call my variable Fred. You can call yours whatever you like. Okay, so we have a variable called Fred, and so we've been talking about 5 plus 6 a lot, so let's just do that again. So let's set Fred. So we have this name now, but we have to give it a value. So we can drag this set Fred to 0, this block out here, and let's put it in on start. So on start here, we can see that we're setting Fred, which is just a name, right, to some value, and that value is 0. So we could come in here and change this to 11, for example, which was 5 plus 6. We could also put in 5 plus 6 using some stuff here in the math one, which we'll do a little bit later. Let's say, okay, so Fred, set Fred. Fred is a name for the value of 11. So let's display that on the microbit screen so we can understand it a little bit more. So if we go to the basic tab here, there's a block called show number. So Fred is a number, right? It's 11, right? He's 11 right now. So we can drag this underneath. We're going to show number, but instead of showing 0, we want to show Fred. So we can come back here to variables, open that tab up, and come and get Fred, and replace this 0 with Fred. Alright, so now you can see on the screen over here, it scrolled across with 11, right? So we've set Fred, which is just a name, and that name has the value 11. And then we're going to show that value, right? Whatever value Fred has. So we've showed 11. Let's change Fred. Let's change him just to show that, like, anytime we change the number over here, what we're setting Fred to, it changes it down here as well. So if we change this to set Fred to 5, then we would see up here, right, that our program is showing 5. So this on start block just means whenever the microbit starts up, so if you either click the reset button or like you plug it into the computer and your program starts, all of the blocks that are in this on start block are going to run in order. So first we're setting Fred to the value of 5, and then we're showing the number Fred, which is 5 in this case, right? Alright, So going along here, so let's write a program, I guess, using variables. So we can use a variable to create a program that counts numbers for us. So let's go back home here and create a new project and call that counter. Alright, so you can see the name of your project down here at the bottom, but we're in this project called counter, and our goal here is for the microbit to display the number 0 when it starts up, and then every time you push the B button, so the button on the right, we want it to count up by 1. So if we start at 0 and we push B, we want it to show 1. And then if we push B again, we want it to show 2. And then if we push B again, we want it to show 3, and so on and so forth. And then when we push A, we want the number to count down. So if the number is at 5 and we push A, then we want it to change to 4. So we can do this using variables. So our variable is going to store the value of whatever count that we're at. So let's go into variables, and let's make a variable here and call it count, right? That's what we're doing. We're counting up and down. So we have this variable called count now, and we need to set it to something. So on start, so when the microbit starts up, we're going to start our count at 0. So right now, count's value is 0, right, after this block runs. Okay, so we've got to give some input now, right? So our count is starting at 0, but when we push the B button, we want it to increase by 1. So if you remember back to yesterday, we went to this input tab and we had the on button pressed. So let's grab one of those, the on button pressed. In this case, let's work with B first. So click this little drop down and change this to a B. And now, instead of setting count to 0, we want it to set it to whatever it was before and add 1 to it. So we're going to need some math here, but I guess first we're also going to need to set it to something else. So when the microbit starts, set count to 0. When B button is pressed, here we're also setting it to 0, but we don't want it to set it to 0, we want to set it to 1 higher than whatever it was before. So this is a little bit tricky, but once you understand this, you'll be able to write some pretty awesome programs. So if we go into the math drawer here, the math tab, let's grab a plus, right? So we want to add 1 to count. So let's grab this down here, put it and replace the 0 with that. So now we're setting count to 0 plus 0. That's not very useful, right? Because 0 plus 0 is always going to be 0. But what we can do is come grab count here. So grab it out of the drawer, the variable drawer again, and replace either one of these zeros with it. So now we're setting count to whatever count is plus 0. And we don't want to add 0 to it, we want to add 1 to it, right? So we can replace that 0 with a 1. Okay, so now in English, as we're just kind of reading this, right, if we're on button B pressed, so when we push the B button, set count, so set this name for some value, to whatever it was before plus 1. Cool, so now we're not showing anything on the screen, but we kind of want to know what the number is, so let's show the number after that. So let's show number, and we don't want to show 0 all the time, right? We want to show whatever count is. Okay. And let's also show the count after we start the program as well, just so we know we're starting at 0. Okay. So the microbit. So if you notice, like every time we put a block over here, the virtual microbit over here goes gray, and that just kind of means that it's restarting with this new program. You can also restart it right here. So we restarted the simulator, right? And okay, so on start, it's it's showing number 0, so we don't necessarily want it to show 0, right? We want it to show count, which is also going to be 0 in this case, but in case we change what it starts at later, we want to have count down here. Okay, so it's showing the number count, and count is 0. Awesome. So now if we push the B button, it should go up by 1. So let's push the B button, and awesome, we have 1. So if we push it again, it'll go to 2, push it again, it'll go to 3, and on and on and on, right? Sweet. So our goal here was to be able to count up and down though, right? So we still have to be able to count down. So let's come up here and grab a button A pressed. And so we're going to do basically the same thing, except for instead of adding one to count, we want to subtract one from count, right? So grab another set count to 0 block over here. Let's grab another math one. So instead of this +1, let's grab this -1. And then you might notice that this has a drop down, so we could change this. So we could have grabbed another +1 and changed it to minus, but there was a -1 in there already for us. So let's grab a count here, right? So we want to set count to whatever count was before, minus, and not -0, but -1, right? Okay, and then after we do that, we want to see what the new value of count is. So let's drag show number down here. And we don't want to show 0, we want to show count. So come to the variables tab, grab another count out there. Remember, feel free to pause this video as much as you need to kind of catch up. I know I'm going a little bit fast. Okay, so now when the microbit starts, we're setting the count to 0, we're showing count. Now, and then when we push A, we set count to whatever count was before, and we -1 from it. And then we're showing it, and then when we push button B, we're setting count to whatever count was before, and we're adding 1 to it. So let's test our program out. I'm going to push B first a couple times, so there we go. We're at count is equal to 1 now. Now count is equal to 2. Now it's 3. Now it's 4. And then if we push the A button, we should get 3, right? So count should become equal to 3 after this. And it is. Awesome. So our program's working, right? So even something as simple as this, like you could use this to keep score in a game, or keep track of something, right? If you for any reason you need to keep track of something, right? You can have your little microbit, push the B button to count up, push the A button to count down, and keep going along. So I want you to, without my help, create another program. So you can hit home and create a new one, and let's call that program, or that project, dice roll. So for this program, and we're going to still make a variable, right? But instead of counting up and down, when we shake the microbit, we want to set it to a random number between 1 and 6. So because of a dice, so we're basically going to use our microbit as a dice, right? As dice. So when you roll a dice, you get a number between 1 and 6, and we can have our microbit do the same thing when we shake it. So a couple hints for you. So you're going to have to create a variable again, just like we did here, and you can call it anything you like, but like roll would be a good example of something that makes sense, but you can make it whatever you want. Okay, and then in the input tab, we've been using the on button A and B press, but there is also this on shake block, so you're probably going to have to use that. There's a block in the math tab here that says pick random 0 to 10. So if you set your variable to this, it'll set it to a random number between 0 and 10. So probably going to need to use that block as well. And then make sure that after you've set your variable to this new random value, and it won't be from 0 to 10, right? It'll be from 1 to 6, that you also show it on the screen. That way you can see what the random number was. So I have a solution linked on the website here if you're following along, but do your best to try it yourself before you look at the answer. So you can go ahead and pause the video, do your best to get that program working. Again, there's a solution, so if you get stuck, you can look at it there. But go ahead and pause the video and give it a shot. Alright, hopefully you had a chance to go through and make your dice program, right? So you could use your microbit instead of rolling dice for any game that you need that for. But all in all, so today we learned what variables were, right? So a variable, to recap, is just a name for some value, and that value can change, but it lets us refer back to the value, right? So we ended up writing 2 programs. So one program that could count up and count down when we pushed the A and B buttons, and then we made basically something like a dice roller, right? So when we shake the microbit, we could get a number from 1 to 6, same as what we would do when we're rolling a dice. So Tomorrow we're going to go over something called control flow and Boolean logic. So those will be more tools that will help us build some more complex and interesting programs. So I will see you tomorrow.